Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase, because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host at Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Nitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. We have with us Jorge Timón. He's a Bitcoin core contributor and a co-founder at Blockstream. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what's a little bit of your background with Bitcoin? How did you get involved with it?
Well, I was very interested in complementary currencies, which are mostly local, and any form of monetary reformism, just for fun. I like to read articles, and then one day found Bitcoin, which was like an alternative currency, but very different from those because it was decentralized. And for example, in some local currencies, like the ones I was looking at in this crisis, the 29 crisis, there was one in Sweden, I think, in the city of Borg. But the central bank, it was a success, but the central bank stopped it. And with Bitcoin, I thought, oh, well, the central bank couldn't stop something that is decentralized. So could be very interesting for this whole movement of alternative currencies.
And then you also got involved with this Frycoin. I had interviewed Mark Friedenbach a couple of years ago. And so I think he came up with the idea. Well, you and him kind of came up with the idea and implemented this Frycoin. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, this currency I was talking about in board, the main characteristic it had that it made it a success even in economic crisis was demurrage, which is like a negative interest on the money you hold. So,
which has been talked about by central banks in our current financial crisis.
Very recently,
so you actually implemented it in this coin.
Yeah, but I think it's different because for them, it's only for the banks, not the...
Oh, well, there are negative interest rates on consumer checking accounts now and savings accounts.
Sure, but dodge that by taking your money out of the bank.
They make that more difficult.
The thing is that you cannot dodge it, so that you are willing to or spend it or invest it or lend it even at zero interest. So that idea is from Silvio Gesell, an economist, a German economist. What I wanted to do, what I propose is, okay, let's modify Bitcoin and add demurrage. And that was a hard fork, but the community didn't like this idea at all.
Well, I don't know why.
Yeah, that's a very different point of view. Bitcoin were mostly gold bags and stuff. Let's do it in an altcoin. And actually, Mark Friedenbach implemented almost all of it.
And implemented it at the protocol level to have the demurrage built in. How does that function, really?
So we took the Bitcoin core code, and because we think we don't want to compete technically with Bitcoin. It has more developers. It makes no sense. It's much easier for us to just rebase on top of it and get all the good stuff. So what we change is the in and output. The amount is fixed in the blockchain. You cannot change that. But when you want to spend it, the algorithm calculates the difference in blocks between the blocks where the output was put in the blockchain and the one you could spend it. From that, you can calculate how much you should have lost, and that goes as fees to miners as well.
Why would you give it to miners as opposed to some other group?
Well, it was the simplest solution. Because otherwise, to whom do you give that, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually that's determined by Social Security or some other political process.
Yeah, but if it was going to be a peer-to-peer currency, that would be a barrier.
Yeah. So, looking at Blockstream, we've got confidential transactions that are going to be rolled out on a two-way peg via Liquid. Could you speak to that a little bit in the kind of at a higher level, like an overall view of what's going on there?
Yeah, so the basic idea is that at a high level, because the crypto is more complicated and I'm not sure I could explain it, the basic idea is that the amounts in the outputs are hidden. Only the payer and the payee or the recipient can see the amounts with a secret they share. Or if you want an auditor to see it, you can share that secret too. But any third party you don't want to see the amounts, don't see it. And at the same time, everybody can see these hidden or encrypted amounts and make sure that you're not creating or destroying money. So it sounds like magic, but it's uses some zero knowledge proof that Greg Maxwell invented. I think it's very cool. Like when they started to talk about this, it's like I could never imagine this was possible, but if it's possible, it's great for privacy. You can also combine it with the CoinJoin, which I think it's a very good solution for privacy, both combined. Because CoinJoin without confidential transactions has many problems. You have to find other people that are moving the same amounts so that the amounts aren't different, because otherwise you could distinguish things only from the amount.
What about some use cases for this? Like perhaps you could give a few use cases and how this will enable further development.
Well, we implemented it in Elements, which is a free software project which also releases on top of Bitcoin periodically. And you can use that to create your own chains. Instead of proof of work, it has signed blocks, so it's more centralized. But for some use cases, I think that makes sense.
What might be an example?
I don't know, perhaps an IOU or something that requires trust already.
Like transfers between exchanges, for example?
Or the use case that we are developing, it's Liquid, which is a platform for exchanges and in the future other services to move Bitcoins. There is a sidechain via the federated 2 API. You move the Bitcoins in the Liquid chain. You can transfer them there with confidential transactions and at some point take them out again back to the Bitcoin main chain.
And you could also issue different types of assets too, right? Maybe you could talk about this?
Yeah, that's confidential assets. So Mark and I had proposed Fry markets. We proposed having multiple assets in this chain that you create too, but we didn't know CT was possible or CA, confidential transaction, and this is much better than our first idea. In the same way you hide the amounts, you would hide the asset ID. So each output would have an asset ID to distinguish one asset from the other. But with this, the asset IDs are hidden, just like with the confidential transactions. And still, you can verify that each asset is not being created or destroyed when it cannot. So I think it's very cool.
And so this would be, for example, you could make some type of you could have gold in the vault, and then you could set up a process where you create the gold on the confidential assets coin, and then those digital tokens can now start circulating.
There would be IOUs for gold deposits
or ownership interests in the gold, more particularly. And then,
you could do the same with fiat, like Tether is doing with other platforms, or for example, Ripple does this too. They call it gateways. You have, for example, Bitstamp USD. It's just they're issuing Bitstamp USD in Ripple that it's just deposits with them, and exchanges will be able to do this in Liquid as well. Not in the first version because we want to focus on the Bitcoin part. But the code is already there, the low-level code.
And then will this be able to be used in different types of smart contracts?
You can. You have smart contracts, just like in Bitcoin, you have scripts and you can build smart contracts with them. With assets, I think more contracts become possible or that are interesting. For example, Lightning is great as it is, only with Bitcoin. But I think it could be even greater if you could use it through several chains with different assets. For example, and Lightning it's a network of smart contracts.
What about the MAST or the Merkleized abstract syntax trees? And is there any type of kind of usages with that in these types of things, or that might also happen in the future?
Well, I think that's mostly about improving efficiency and privacy. MAST is what allows you to do is not showing the whole script, only the parts you use. Mm-hmm. And that's very interesting, but I think it's kind of orthogonal to CD, and I would hope that's get adopted in Bitcoin directly without implementing it first in Elements or some other testnet. Like, for example, we did with Elements, we implemented SegWit first there, but as a hard fork, we didn't know it was possible as a software yet. And it was nice to experiment there to then use it on Bitcoin. But I think MAST, people are doing proposals for MAST directly to Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin adopts it, we will get it once we rebase. So, yeah, I think it's very interesting, but I see it kind of orthogonal or more related to Bitcoin directly.
So as we get kind of close to wrapping up this interview, you have a history of contributing to the Bitcoin community. You've probably learned a lot over the years. Do you have a piece or two of advice that you would give new people coming into this complicated space?
Yeah. I learned a lot by contributing to Bitcoin Core, because reviewers, by explaining the defects in your code, help you learn a lot. I guess the way I started contributing, it's not very... I would not recommend it, because I started with many refactors, but the code is much well organized now, so it's not so easy to find easy refactors now. Plus, now with the Python test framework it's much better developed, better done. So I would recommend to start there, writing tests in the Python framework, and that makes you learn the RPC interface too. So I think it's a good place to start. Also, that's easy to get merged, and I think it's important for you to build some confidence to get something merged. So start small changes. Don't try to do something very big, because that's less likely to be accepted. Trial and error, I guess.
Well, there you heard it, except not with your seeds, right?
Rec test.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there we have it. We've had Jorge Timón, a Bitcoin Core contributor, co-founder of Blockstream, giving us some helpful insight into what we're going to see with the future of Bitcoin. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you.
Be sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.